It started like any other Saturday morning, birds chirping outside, fresh coffee brewing, and the sun peeking through the blinds when suddenly, bang, bang, bang. 3 loud slams on the front door shattered the silence like gunshots in a library. I checked the security cam, and there she was. Karen. Not just any Karen, but the HOA president who wore power like perfume and paranoia like lipstick. Standing with her arms crossed and eyes darting like a raccoon in headlights, I opened the door. "An inch. Can I help you?" And she immediately shoved a silver key into the lock, jiggling it violently as if she were opening her own home. "This is HOA property, and my master key should work. You've changed the locks, haven't you?" "That's a violation," she spat. And before I could blink, she had pulled out her phone and dialed 911, screaming about a trespasser barricading themselves inside community property. And what she didn't know what would change everything was that the 911 dispatcher on duty that morning wasn't just any employee. It was my 23-year-old son, a combat-trained former Marine with zero tolerance for intimidation. 911. "What's your emergency?" he said calmly, recognizing her shrill voice instantly. Karen went on and on about being an HOA official and how her universal key was supposed to work, but the criminal had locked her out. "Ma'am," my son replied, his tone turning cold. "As an iceberg, you're saying you tried to enter a locked private residence using a key that doesn't belong to you." And she replied, "It's HOA protocol. My key works on every house." And that's when the shock hit her. "Ma'am," he continued, "that address is registered to a private homeowner, and you are currently committing attempted unlawful entry. Stay where you are." But Karen hung up in panic and stepped back, looking at my ring cam like it just bit her, and before I could ask her to leave, she screamed again, "I know my rights. You're going to regret this," then stormed off, only to return 10 minutes later with 2 security guards in tow, one holding pepper spray and the other a clipboard, like it was a weapon. "We're doing a property wellness check," one of them said, but didn't make eye contact, and when I asked to see a warrant or a legal document, Karen shouted, under HOA Rule 16b, "We can force entry for safety concerns." But just as they moved to try the door again, a black unmarked SUV skidded into the driveway, and out stepped Black Cobra. My son's old squad mate turned private enforcement specialist, his badge gleaming under his leather jacket, eyes unreadable, but deadly calm. "Step away from the door," he said, voice quiet but sharp enough to slice bone. The security guards froze. Karen gasped, "Who are you?" And he replied, "Private enforcer, operating under civilian protection protocol." Then looked her dead in the eyes, and you just made this federal. Karen's face drained of color as he flipped out his phone and showed a live 911 log, her voice blaring from it like a siren of guilt. "I need backup," Black Cobra said calmly. "We got unlawful forced entry, harassment, impersonation of authority, possible attempted burglary," and Karen exploded. "That's slander. That's slander." But the camera footage didn't lie, and now her own HOA guards were backing away from her. The pepper spray guy mumbling, "Ma'am, I didn't sign up for this." And suddenly neighbors began peeking through their blinds, phones in hand, filming, posting, whispering, and the irony couldn't be like a Karen, who once ticketed a kid's lemonade stand, was now being investigated on 3 counts of felony trespass. But here's the real twist. She still didn't know who she'd just called, who had sent Black Cobra, and who was about to confront her not as a dispatcher, but as a son, a protector, a man who knew how far this woman had gone over the years with her reign of terror over the neighborhood. Because behind that badge was a man who remembered how she'd fined his dad for parking 2 inches on the grass during his cancer treatment. And suddenly, everything became personal, deeply personal. And as Cobra moved toward her, Karen shrieked, "I want a lawyer. I want the mayor. I am the HOA." But Cobra just said, "No, ma'am, you're under investigation, and by the way the dispatcher you screamed at, he's my best friend and her son." And in that moment, the camera captured the full collapse of her arrogance, the shaking hands, the way her mouth opened but no sound came out, and then I stepped forward, not as a victim, but as a homeowner reclaiming peace. "You thought your key opened every door," I said, "but not this one, not anymore." And she was escorted off the porch as backup cruisers arrived with sirens off, silent but powerful, just like the justice about to be served. But this was only the beginning, because what we discovered next Inside a file Karen accidentally dropped during her panic would shake the entire HOA to its core. The folder landed like a cursed book, thudding onto the porch as Karen was dragged backward, still screaming about legal immunity and federal HOA jurisdiction. Her words more panicked than powerful now, and when Black Cobra picked it up, the air shifted. The neighbors who had been filming went silent. Even the birds seemed to pause as if sensing that the real story had just begun. Cobra flipped it open slowly, and inside was a stack of documents marked internal use only, and right at the top was a printed email titled Confidential Homeowners to be Flagged, with names, dozens of names, mine included, alongside notes like difficult, non-compliant, refused monthly dues increase, and the real kicker, eligible for HOA restructuring removal, which to any legal ear sounded dangerously close to a hit list masked under bureaucracy. Cobra's jaw tightened, and he passed me the folder. And my hands trembled not with fear, but fury as I flipped through pages of falsified complaints, tampered violation reports, even manipulated photos of supposed code violations. And then we found the financials payments taken for fines that were never documented, charges issued against dead residents, and one folder tab labeled simply Key Program, which revealed something far more sinister than Karen's tantrums. A spreadsheet of over 40 residents and matching key codes, names of locksmiths, timestamps of unauthorized entries logged under wellness checks, but clearly targeted surveillance, or worse. This isn't just misuse of power, Cobra muttered. This is organized abuse. And then it hit us. Karen hadn't just been trying her key to assert dominance, she was testing it to see if we had caught on, because the moment she realized her master key failed, she knew her web was unraveling. But now we had proof, tangible and undeniable. And Cobra wasted no time. He called my son back at dispatch, this time bypassing protocol using his federal access code from his time in the Joint Task Force. Activate Protocol 8 Zulu, whistleblower protection and HOA code audit. And the line went quiet for a second. Then my son said, "Copy that. Records syncing now. Transmitting request for municipal auditor and civil legal team," and within minutes, a real unmarked city vehicle rolled up to agents stepping out. Not police, not FBI, but something scarier for people like Karen, government auditors. Clipboard warriors with the power to shut entire organizations down. And as Karen saw them approaching, her knees buckled slightly and she leaned on one of her own security guards, who now looked more like a paid actor in the wrong movie. "I have nothing to hide," she mumbled, but even her own voice betrayed her. Trembling with guilt and exhaustion, "Then you won't mind explaining this," one agent said, holding up a page with a list of HOA fines totaling $57,000 over 18 months, all directed to residents who had filed noise complaints against Karen's backyard construction. The silence from her was louder than any siren. And then something strange happened. The agent turned to me and said, "Sir, did you approve installation of solar panels in the back of your home 6 months ago?" I blinked, confused. "No, I didn't install solar," and he flipped open a permit application filed under my name with a forged signature, a date stamp from Karen's office, and even a fake inspection report, which meant someone had filed false improvements under our addresses to get subsidies or kickbacks from contractors working with the agent. "This just turned into a federal fraud case," the agent said, and Karen screamed, "I didn't sign that. I don't know anything about solar." But her signature was right there, as clear as the guilt in her eyes. And it hit me. Karen hadn't just been greedy, she'd been desperate. Drowning in a scam so deep it needed fake violations, false fines, illegal entries, and forged upgrades to survive. And when people didn't comply, they got flagged, pushed, or removed. And now, with Cobra's recording of her attempted break, the call logs from my son's dispatch center, and the whistleblown documents from her own folder, this wasn't just a takedown, it was a reckoning. But before we could process the weight of what we'd uncovered, Cobra's phone buzzed with an emergency ping, and his face darkened. "They're wiping files at the HOA office." He said, "Karen must have backup," and without wasting a breath, he turned to the agents. "We need an immediate warrant to secure 321 Parkview Lane, the headquarters of our HOA and apparently the heart of the operation." The agents nodded and split up one to secure the vehicle, the other already on the radio with municipal judges, and as sirens approached in the distance, Karen, now shaking, whispered something. Under her breath, he told me to do it. He said it was normal. And Cobra snapped, Who? Who told you? But she froze, eyes wide, lips sealed, like someone remembering a name that scared them more than jail time. And that's when Cobra turned to me and said something I'll never forget. We're not dealing with one rogue Karen anymore. We're dealing with a system that trained her. And I felt it too, like we'd uncovered the top of something far bigger, deeper, and darker than our little suburban drama. Because now it wasn't just about us, it was about the names in that folder. The homes listed for restructuring, the people fined into foreclosure, evicted, or harassed until they moved. This was corruption wrapped in neighborly smiles. And it was about to explode. And as the black SUV pulled out of the driveway toward HOA headquarters with Cobra behind the wheel and Karen detained in the back seat, I looked down at the folder again and flipped one last page of memo labeled Special Access List, and at the top was a name I never expected to see. The mayor's office assistant, listed as liaison for project cover. And that's when it all clicked. The HOA wasn't rogue. It was protected, systemic, and backed by people with power. But now we had their blueprint, their fingerprints, and their face caught in the act. And tomorrow, the storm was coming for them. Because Black Cobra doesn't just fight back, he wipes corruption clean. The storm wasn't in the sky, it was in the wheels of that black SUV, tearing through the manicured streets of our overregulated neighborhood. The HOA headquarters just minutes away, but pulsing in our minds like the heart of a corrupt organism. And in the back seat, Karen sat silent now. No more shrieks or threats. Just a blank stare like someone who'd finally realized the house of cards she'd built wasn't just collapsing, it was being set on fire. Cobra drove like a man with a mission and a memory. Because this wasn't just protocol to him, this was personal. And every block we passed was a reminder of someone bullied or intimidated into silence. And when we pulled up to the beige, stucco building marked HOA administration with its faux colonial pillars and fake security cameras, there were already signs of panic lights flickering, silhouettes behind frosted glass moving fast, and just as Cobra stepped out, the first figure bolted from the side door with a box of files clutched tight. Hey, Cobra shouted, and without hesitation, he took off, moving like a shadow with a badge, intercepting the man before he reached his car, slamming him against the hood. Name Cobra barked, and the man, sweating bullets, mumbled, Terry. I just handled the AT. I was told to clear the backups. Cobra flipped open the box and saw what he feared: hard drives, USBs, 2 smashed tablets, and a company burner phone with a SIM card missing. You're destroying evidence, Terry, Cobra said coldly, which means you're not or complicit. And just then the agents arrived, badges raised, entering the building like stormtroopers, but quieter, more focused. Because this wasn't about brute force. It was about sealing off every exit before the cancer could spread. I followed behind, and when we entered the main office, it looked like a battlefield, papers everywhere, drawers pulled. One woman crying at her desk, while another frantically tried to unplug a printer that was still spitting out legal letters addressed to people I knew. People who had moved away last year but were still being fined, still being targeted. Nobody. Move, one agent said. Every file, every machine, every login is now under municipal seizure. And then they pointed to a locked door in the back labeled boardroom. The epicenter of control, and one of the guards said, It's code locked, but Cobra just nodded, took out a signal jammer from his jacket. And in less than 10 seconds the keypad shorted and the door swung open to reveal a dark oak table. A wall of TV monitors showing live ring feeds from various neighborhood houses. And on the wall a massive whiteboard titled Property Value, Control Plan Q3 Objectives, listing addresses, color-coded tiers of priority enforcement. Red dots next to names of residents who had filed complaints, and green ones next to those who had donated to the HOA's discretionary fund. It wasn't just mismanagement, it was a cartel disguised as a committee, and at the head of the table sat a man in a navy suit and gold tie. Arms crossed, not even blinking. You're making a mistake, he said calmly. These are all standard HOA practices, incentivized compliance, tiered enforcement tits, legal. But Cobra stepped forward and dropped the folder Karen had left on the table like a grenade. Then why is your name on half these forged signatures? He asked, and the man's smile cracked for just a second. You're operating way outside your jurisdiction, he said, But then the agent behind Cobra spoke up. Actually, under Civil Code 1497, Section D, this operation is now under municipal fraud review. And that's when the man stood, slowly, almost impressed. Fine, he said. Then you'll need to take it up with our legal partners, and pointed to a small plaque behind him. McAllister and Hoyt City Development Advisory. And my stomach dropped. Because that law firm didn't just advise HOAs, they advised the mayor's housing reform board. And that meant this. It wasn't just a local corruption ring, it was feeding state-level policies. Fines were being turned into foreclosure leverage, and properties were being snatched up, flipped, and resold to developers tied to the same advisory group. Cobra turned to the agents. We need to escalate to state jurisdiction now. And even as he spoke, the man in the suit was already reaching for his phone. But one agent moved faster, seizing it midair. And what they found confirmed everything. Encrypted messages, payment logs, and one text that read, "KM won't hold if key incident leaks neutralize quietly." And it didn't take long to decode KM Karen Mitchell, the woman in the SUV. The woman they were willing to silence to protect the bigger operation. And just then, one of the agents walked in holding a destroyed shredder bag. "We reconstructed enough of this," he said. "There's a list of properties marked for uncontested acquisition code for forced sales after bogus violations. And on that list were 7 homes from our street, including mine. But here's what made it worst. 3 of them were marked completed. And when I asked what that meant, the agent looked down and said, it means they were fined, forced out, and sold under market to private buyers tied to board members." And suddenly, I remembered Mr. Lawson down the block, who'd moved last month after getting 5 citations in 2 weeks for weeds and window tint. This wasn't petty harassment. It was corporate theft masked as civic duty. And the room grew tense as Cobra leaned in toward the man in the suit. "You think because you wear a tie and talk soft, you're untouchable. But you've been treating people like numbers, and now those numbers are evidence." And before anyone could respond, one of the agent's radios crackled. "Dispatch to Field 911 call just came in from Karen Mitchell's attorney claims." Cobra grabbed the mic. "Negative. She's detained under municipal fraud clause and pending federal referral." But the voice replied, "That's not what they're claiming. They're trying to flip the narrative, paint this as abuse of power by a rogue former soldier." And that's when we all realized they weren't going down without a smear campaign, a legal counterstrike, a whole machine of misinformation to bury the truth before it could breathe. But Cobra just smiled and said, "Then we go louder, we go public," and turned to the agent with the seizure order. "Get me access to the resident email system and broadcast board." Within 5 minutes, the screens in the lobby of the HOA HQ began to flash. "Emergency community update all. Residents, please read." And Cobra stood at the camera like a soldier at war, delivering a live message to every home. Fences, or Doozis, is about power, abuse, and theft, and we have the evidence to prove it. And behind him, we laid out the documents, the hard drives, the surveillance files, everything. And suddenly, phones across the neighborhood buzzed. As the live stream spread, comments pouring in, people reacting in real time. Shocked, angry, some crying, some typing furiously. They find my grandma for wind chimes. I knew those citations were fake. My camera got disconnected last month and I didn't know why. And then the most chilling comment of all, "I worked there. I have more files. I'll talk." And just like that, the people turned no longer afraid of fines, of fake citations, of Karen's clipboard militia. Because when you expose the system, the fear dies first, and justice comes second. But it comes loud, and this was just the beginning. Phones across the city lit up, some with texts of disbelief, others with shared rage, but all of them buzzing with the truth. The Homeowners Association wasn't just broken, it had become a front for organized manipulation, targeted extortion, and political profiteering. By midnight, the HOA HQ had been surrounded not by police, but by residents, families, veterans, mothers with toddlers. Teenagers holding cardboard signs that said things like, "We're not your property. My grandma paid that fine with her medication money, and tell the truth, Karen." The crowd was silent at first, like they were mourning years of gaslighting, quiet suffering, and neighbor fear. Then someone shouted, Play the video again." So we did. From Cobra's phone, the screens at the front of the HOA building replayed the live stream. The voice was steady, hard-edged with righteous anger, the kind that comes only from a man who's seen what happens when bad people hide behind paperwork and policy. "You've been lied to," Cobra said in the video. "Not just by Karen, not just by your HOA board, but by a system built to make you feel like it's your fault when they fail you." This time, they cheered. Cobra wasn't there to hear it. He was already gone pulled by municipal agents into a secure briefing room in City Hall, where things were moving fast now. Karen had flipped, not by choice, but by survival. Once she saw the list of witnesses lining up, the residents whose homes had been raided under routine inspections, the former board members coming forward with burner phones and ledger books, they didn't need to pressure her anymore. She wanted immunity. She wanted to name names, and she did. A state senator, two developers, an executive from the law firm McAllister and Hoyt, even a city official, someone who had signed off on dozens of fast-tracked home seizures, citing compliance failures that were now proven to be fabricated. And the most dangerous revelation, a program buried under a development incentive called Urban Renewal, Route 6 an initiative designed to identify low-value residential zones that could be restructured into high-income housing. That's what the fake fines were for. That's what the citations were meant to do. Force middle-class families out, buy their homes for pennies, bulldoze them, then sell the lots to developers for millions. And it had already started. 10 neighborhoods, hundreds of families. Most of them never even knew it was happening. Back at the HOA headquarters, the agents gave me the floor. I stepped outside and looked at the sea of people. There were over 200 of them now, flashlights up, phones, filming, kids in pajamas, elders in wheelchairs. And I realized something in that moment. We were never powerless. We were just tricked into thinking so. I raised the megaphone. My voice shook at first, but then it found strength. "They counted on our silence," I said. "They counted on us not talking to each other, on us feeling alone. But look around. Look how many of us there are. This isn't just about my house or yours. This is about every voice they tried to bury under paper and fines and fear." They roared. Then someone shouted, "Where's Cobra?" And as if scripted by fate, a black city vehicle pulled up. The door opened. Cobra stepped out. No tactical gear this time, no gloves. Just a man in a black shirt and jeans holding one folder in his hand. The final report. He walked straight up to me. "It's done," he said. "They're done." "What happens now?" Someone yelled from the crowd. Cobra turned to them and answered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You form a real board, a real community. You watch each other's backs. You audit everything. You don't let them back in any of them. You turn this from a neighborhood into a movement." That night, the residents voted. Not just to disband the existing HOA board, but to petition the city to revoke its license altogether and replace it with a community council overseen by resident-elected volunteers. Karen's name was stripped from every file. Her accomplices were named in a criminal referral. And over the next week, Cobra worked day and night with a team of legal aides to prepare something far more powerful than an exposé, civil lawsuit. Over 300 people had joined the claim. Families who had been fined, evicted, bullied, gaslit, one by one. They told their stories, some in court, some to the press. And Cobra didn't stop there. He made sure the scandal went to the state press. News anchors called it the master, key conspiracy, and Karen, she disappeared into witness protection. That's all anyone knows. But the system, it collapsed. Developers pulled out. The law firm was investigated. The senator stepped down, and our neighborhood, it bloomed. Fences that used to divide us were now gone. People were planting gardens, helping paint each other's homes. Real conversations replaced complaint forms. And every Friday night, without fail, someone would host Porch Watch, a simple gathering where neighbors would bring lawn chairs, a speaker, and just talk, laugh, share. We weren't scared anymore, and the old HOA building, condemned, torn down, replaced by a public park named by the residents themselves. Cobra Square, the plaque reads. For those who stood up when the system said, "Sit down," but the real change wasn't a plaque or a lawsuit. It was in how we saw each other. How we realized that behind every door was a family, a story, a voice worth hearing. because fear dies when truth speaks. And if you're listening to this now, wondering what to do if something like this happens to you, here's the answer. Don't wait. Document everything. Talk to your neighbors. Pull records. Get copies of every citation. Ask questions. Demand transparency. Refuse to be gaslit. And, most of all, don't stay silent, because they win when you stay quiet. But when you rise, they fall.